Over here you have the library of Alice A. Bailey. And if you see, she has numerous volumes here on the New Age movement and spiritualism. This is right here in the Lucius Trust library located in London, directly next to the United Nations Center as well.
Perhaps the most prominent UN figurehead with regards to spiritual unification of the world is this man, Robert Mueller. He died in 2010, but was Under-Secretary General of the UN for 40 years, and he is revered within the UN as the philosopher or prophet of hope of the United Nations. His spiritual viewpoints were quite clear. He said, "We must move as quickly as possible to a one-world government, a one-world religion, under a one-world leader." He believed that peace for this one-world order rested primarily on religion, saying, "Peace will be impossible without the taming of fundamentalism through a united religions that professes faithfulness only to the global spirituality and to the health of this planet." He also said, "My great personal dream is to get a tremendous alliance between all the major religions and the UN." Because he held one of the top jobs in the UN for 40 years, he obviously had huge influence on the goals of the organization, but the problem goes much further than that, because as well as being the driving force behind the spirituality of the UN, he also created something called the World Core Curriculum, which, as the name suggests, is intended to be an education program or framework for the entire world. He is therefore also known throughout the world as the father of global education. Not only this, but he actually established specialist Robert Mueller schools where his educational ideas could be taught in their purest form. There are over 30 in existence and more are being established each year. The World Core Curriculum earned him the UNESCO Peace Education Prize in 1989. Now, since UNESCO is just an NGO of the UN, that seems a little meaningless to give yourself an award, but anyway, following the plaudits he received from within the UN, he also drew up a framework for world media coverage, as well as a framework for planetary and cosmic consciousness, and a framework for arts and culture. Basically, these are plans for how they might dominate the information flows to influence the mindsets of the world. My focus is the World Core Curriculum because the idea was that the UN issues this document to the nations, who then use it as the framework for their own regional school curriculums. By this method, all the schools around the world would start teaching their kids the same ideas about life. The coming generations would then have the same worldview and the same attitudes for the New World Order. Robert Mueller said of it that we must steer our children toward global citizenship, earth-centered beliefs, socialist values, and the collective mindset which is becoming a requirement for the 21st century workforce. He went on to say, "A World Core Curriculum might seem utopian today. By the end of the year 2000, it will be a down-to-earth daily reality in all the schools of the world." Now, he was a little ambitious with the timescale, but the determination to see it happen hasn't gone away. Here in Scotland, a new curriculum has just been introduced called the Curriculum for Excellence, and although it has been heavily criticised by parents and by teachers alike, it openly bases itself on UN frameworks, and one of its key components is preparing children for global citizenship, and it uses phrases like the child's well-being and well-becoming. Most people wouldn't pick up on that, but we know from the evolution part that the word becoming is an occult term for the evolution towards godhood. So if this World Core Curriculum is to be the source for national curriculums around the world that will be taught to coming generations of children, we need to find out what's in it. Robert Mueller wrote in the World Core Curriculum notes that the underlying philosophy upon which the Robert Mueller School is based will be found in the teachings set forth in the books of Alice A. Bailey. The school is now certified as a United Nations associated school providing education for international cooperation and peace. So this whole curriculum that is to be implemented around the world, and which is to be fed to every child on the planet to prepare them for a one-world government, rests upon the philosophies of this one woman called Alice A. Bailey. We better find out more about her. Alice A. Bailey lived from 1880 to 1949 and spent most of her time as a teacher and writer on themes of the occult, astrology, spirituality, and theosophy. She stated that the majority of her books were telepathically channeled through her by a spirit being who she believed to be a master of wisdom. Initially she just referred to the being as the Tibetan, or by the initials DK. Later she called it Djwal Khul'a. She showed the same kind of mental disturbance that we've seen in other occultists in the past. As a child, Bailey was deeply unhappy and attempted suicide on 3 occasions, once when she was 5, then when she was 11, and the third time at an unspecified time before the age of 15. It was after this third attempt, aged 15, on June the 30th, 1895, that she was apparently visited by a stranger who told her that she needed to develop self-control in preparation for certain work that was planned for her to do. Coming from an Anglican background, she initially believed this man to be Jesus, but later identified him as a spirit called Master Kuthumi after she went to the occult Theosophical Society and saw a portrait of him hanging on the wall. In earlier life, Bailey was married to an Episcopalian minister, but after it failed, she severed ties with her Christian heritage altogether and remarried a 32nd degree Freemason, Foster Bailey. Together they founded the esoteric magazine The Beacon and started a company called the Lucifer Trust. This organization was created to manage the business of publishing her 25 demonically channeled books. They later changed its name to the Lucis Trust to hide its true meaning. This Lucis Trust is today another key NGO for the United Nations. As a subsidiary to the Lucis Trust, they also created the World Goodwill Organization to help mobilize the energy of goodwill to cooperate in the work of preparation for the reappearance of the Christ, to educate public opinion on the causes of the major world problems, and to help create the thought form of the solutions. She also used the Lucis Trust to found something called the Arcane School, which gives a series of courses on her views on karma, reincarnation, and the divine nature of man. The school uses typical hierarchical degrees of esoteric knowledge. As is to be expected of anyone driven by the hidden hand of Satan, she also had the telltale hatred for the Jewish people, referring to them as the Jewish problem. Now from that background you can probably tell that her teaching's not going to be good, but here are some quotes. She wrote, "I dedicate myself anew to the service of the coming one, and will do all I can to prepare men's minds and hearts for that event. I have no other life intention." Now when occultists talk about a coming one, or even use the term Christ or cosmic Christ, they are not referring to Jesus, who in their inverted version of events is the evil one. To them, the Christ is in fact Lucifer, the Antichrist. This is the one for whom they wait, and the one who they are preparing the world to receive. Indeed, she clarifies this when she writes, "The Tibetan has asked me to make clear that when he is speaking of the Christ, he is referring to his official name as head of the hierarchy. The Christ works for all men irrespective of their faith. He does not belong to the Christian world any more than to the Buddhist or Mohammedan or any other faith. There is no need for any man to join the Christian church in order to be affiliated with Christ. The requirements are to love your fellow men, lead a disciplined life, recognize the divinity in all faiths and all beings, and rule your daily life with love." So here we see her demonic spirit guide telling her to promote the idea that all faiths are equal and there is no single faith that is exclusively true. These are the ideas that are built into Robert Muller's World Core curriculum. Alice A. Bailey wrote that when their Antichrist comes, first of all, he will come to a world which is essentially one world. So they believe that they have to create this one world order in order to prepare the way for their Antichrist. That's what the UN are doing. Bailey goes on to say, "The major effect of his appearance will surely be to demonstrate in every land the effects of a spirit of inclusiveness, an inclusiveness which will be channeled or expressed through him. All who seek right human relations will be gathered automatically to him, whether they are in one of the great world religions or not." She then goes on to say, "All who see no true or basic difference between religion and religion, or between man and man, or nation and nation, will rally round him. Those who embody the spirit of exclusiveness and separateness will stand automatically and equally revealed, and all men will know them for what they are." So the Antichrist will have all the world's religions rallying round him and finding in him their shared Babylonian origins, which will unite them all. But yet she talks distastefully about another group of people at this time who will be exclusive and separated from the group. Who will these people be? As you might imagine, we who are seen to be opposing this world peace and not joining in the unity will be seen as hateful and intolerant. We therefore will be hated and despised and persecuted for not conforming to the crowd. This spirit of inclusiveness, as she calls it, is already on show in the world today, but it will grow stronger. Bailey herself confirmed that all religions emanate from the same spiritual source, and that one day everyone would come to realize this. As they do so, she predicted that the world would see the emergence of a universal world religion and new world order. She said that this was no distant dream, but was actually happening even in her own time. She wrote, "There will not be any dissociation between the universal church, the sacred lodge of all true Masons, and the inner circles of the esoteric societies. In this way the goals and work of the United Nations shall be solidified, and a new Church of God, led by all the religions and by all the spiritual groups, shall put an end to the great heresy of separateness. All forms of Freemasonry and all the false religions and philosophies of the world that have their roots in Babylon will one day come together under a single banner. This is the essence of postmodernism. People are moving away from outright atheism and returning to ancient religion." Remember, Robert Mueller said that the basis of his educational ideas came from Alice A. Bailey. These are the ideas that the UN gave him an award for, and these are the ideas that the UN wants to be filtered into every school around the world so that coming generations of children will grow up with this mindset. One of Alice A. Bailey's predecessors in the Theosophical Society, in fact one of the co-founders, was Helena Blavatsky, and amongst her books were Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine. From that latter book she says, "Lucifer represents life, thought, progress, civilization, liberty, independence. Lucifer is the Logos, the serpent, the savior." She later said, "It is Satan who is the real god of our planet and the only god." She also said, "The celestial virgin which thus becomes the mother of God and devils at one and the same time, for she is the ever-loving beneficent deity. But in antiquity and in reality, Lucifer or Luciferius is the name. Lucifer is the divine and terrestrial light, the Holy Ghost and Satan at one and the same time." In it she also confirms that the different names for the mystery gods and goddesses are the same being by different names, saying, "Now we have but to remember that Shiva and the Palestinian Baal or Moloch and Saturn are identical." Helena Blavatsky has many followers of her teaching. Some who are known to be fans of her books were Adolf Hitler, Aleister Crowley, Mahatma Gandhi, Elvis Presley, and William Butler Yeats. Her dying words were, "Keep the link unbroken, do not let my last incarnation be a failure." Her immediate successor was Annie Besant, and then following her came Alice A. Bailey, who in turn became the source of inspiration to Robert Mueller, who in turn became the spiritual figurehead in the United Nations. They've all been links in a chain, and they knew it. So we understand what Robert Mueller means when he boasts that the United Nations is not a man-made creation, but is primarily a spiritual organization with a spiritual source. No human force will ever be able to destroy the United Nations, for the United Nations is not a mere building or a mere idea. It is not a man-made creation. The United Nations is the vision light of the Absolute Supreme, which is slowly, steadily, and unerringly illuminating the ignorance, the night of our human life. The divine success and supreme progress of the United Nations is bound to become a reality. At his choice hour, the Absolute Supreme will ring his own victory bell here on earth through the loving and serving heart of the United Nations. I think we've heard enough now about the United Nations to know what it's up to, but let's make one last stop before we conclude the UN section. Dag Hammarskjöld was responsible for establishing this meditation room in the middle of the UN. He said, "The stone in the middle of the room has more to tell us. We may see it as an altar, empty, not because there is no God, not because it is an altar to an unknown God, but because it is dedicated to the God whom man worships under many names and in many forms." He also said, "The meditation room faces northeast. To enter the room, one must proceed from darkness to light. To occultists, you are walking from darkness at the lower end to light at the top end. You will therefore notice that the only light in the room comes from the narrow end behind the mural. The occultists don't really care how long it takes to reach their goal. They don't care if their dreams don't materialize in their lifetime. They simply see themselves as cogs of a machine, or like Helena Blavatsky said, links in a chain that will lead to an ultimate end. The Dalai Lama said, "The United Nations becomes for us the answer to world suffering, world darkness, and world ignorance. The inner vision of the United Nations is the gift supreme. This vision the world can deny for 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 years. In other words, we can resist for as long as we like, but it will not stop until it realizes its aim. It may take 10 years, it may take 100 years. The United Nations will keep working towards our enslavement and the establishment of a new world order where the Antichrist can return."
And just various books on magic and communicating with animals. Very interesting. The teachings of Zoroaster. Rational mysticism. This is Blavatsky. Now, yeah. Now that you have up here Blavatsky's writings on secret doctrines, Madame Blavatsky. I mean, this is it. This is where it's all at. You can just imagine how many fallen angels have to be in this place itself, because these are ideologies that they themselves conceive. It's amazing.